Hello and welcome to the video. My name is Spencer and I am a senior at the University of Georgia, and I'm currently taking a conservation biology class, and we were kind of instructed to share a topic on conservation to a wider audience. So I thought that it would be great to write a children's book because I really believe that education is super important, and I think that if we can teach kids to live sustainably and understand what biodiversity is and what conservation is at a young age, that they can carry that into their adulthood and really make a difference in the environment and then even in humanity. So I wrote this children's book. It's called What is Biodiversity? And so this video is really just meant for parents, kind of like to promote discussion and your understanding about the topics that I kind of discussed and tried to make as comprehensible as possible to children. And so I hope that you gain a lot of information from this video, and that you kind of have a deeper understanding. Even though this discussion is a very broad overview, it would take days and hours to actually cover everything that is related to this topic on biodiversity and human impact on biodiversity, and also biodiversity's importance in our lives. So I do have a couple of goals in mind in writing the book and in this video discussion for parents. One is bring awareness to our impact on the environment. So people have an impact on the environment whether they know it or not. And oftentimes, as a collective humanity, we've had a pretty detrimental effect on the environment, even though there are plenty of ways that we can promote a healthy environment. So the second goal of mine is I want to spark a child's, or even you parents, your interest in the scientific fields that are related to conservation biology. Conservation biology is a very interdisciplinary field of study, field of research, that kind of encompasses so many different fields of science, from genetics to evolution to ecology, even like wildlife and ecosystem management. And there are just a lot of pieces that go together. So there are a lot of people that can make a big difference in relation to conservation biology. My third is provide simple ways that an individual can decrease their negative impact or ecological footprint on the environment. So just effective, simple ways that you can kind of alter in your everyday life to promote a healthy environment, or at least reduce your effect. And then lastly, I want to emphasize the importance of education, because education is kind of a necessary first step in really doing anything or changing anything, because education is so important, especially related to conservation biology, because like if you don't have an understanding or knowledge on a certain subject, then like you really it's hard to make a change or make an impact. So without further ado, I do want to just kind of cover the basic concepts that I talked about in the children's book. But obviously, in the children's book, I tried to make it a lot simpler so that even younger kids can understand what biodiversity is, and then the various things related to biodiversity. So broadly, you can read this really in-depth definition that I got from a scientific article, but really biodiversity, if you think about the entire world, is every single living thing on Earth. So that could be all the animals, so insects, fish, mammals, birds, plants included, and then fungi, and every living thing on Earth is part of biodiversity. Even humans are a part of biodiversity. And so, the more species, the more types of animals, types of plants, types of fungi on Earth, the more biodiverse it is. So just think that, more biodiversity means more different kinds of animals and plants and, fungi and stuff. So there is currently a problem. So biodiversity is currently decreasing at a very accelerated rate compared to what is, quote unquote, normal. And some scientists say that the rate of extinction, which is when there are no more members left of a species, that's, that the current rate of extinction is greater than 1,000 times the background extinction rate. And the background extinction rate is really just, without any human impact or any outside influence, that is how many species or types of, animals or plants would typically go extinct. So extinction is, a normal process of nature, but there have been times in history when it's been accelerated. So, think back to the dinosaurs 65 million years ago with a meteorite. And really, some people are even considering today a sixth mass extinction. And a lot of people have coined it the Anthropocene, which means human cause. And people are even saying that, like humans are having as much of an impact, if not a greater impact, on biodiversity and different species as even, the meteorite had on the dinosaurs. So what's causing the problem? So there are many threats to biodiversity. And, I've kind of outlined the 7 broad threats to biodiversity. The first being habitat destruction, which when you think about it, it's just like, the environment. You just take an entire habitat and you pretty much destroy the entire thing. And then there's also habitat fragmentation, which I usually think of like a road that you put like through the middle of a forest, and that kind of creates a big problem for some of these species who need to get back and forth or who may be kind of cut off. So I just think of a lot of like different pieces of something, fragments. And then habitat degradation and pollution. So like littering, I think of like single-use plastics in the ocean, just different ways that you can degrade or make the environment not as healthy as it typically would be. Also global climate change, which is, indirectly caused by humans' activities. So like driving cars or, factories, the burning of fuels that increases greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and causes, global climate change, warming of oceans, ocean acidification, etc. Also overexploitation of species for human use. So this is like overfishing or overhunting, the depletion of certain species for human gain. Then also the invasion of non-native species and the spread of disease. And both of these are largely in part due to human trade, human travel, and then just like being in closer contact with species that one typically wouldn't be a part of. And again, these are all human related activities, and they are direct or indirect. And really, whether you think that you as an individual have an impact or not, you really do, even if it's just minimal. But in developed countries, we typically have a greater impact. And if you think about it, there are almost 8 billion people on this earth. So even if every person has a small impact on the environment in a negative way, 8 billion people, that kind of escalates and becomes a huge problem, even when, one typically wouldn't think of it that way. And so, loss in biodiversity can cause a lot of problems. And really, I just want to outline the problems that can be related to humans, because, if there's a loss in biodiversity, humans are connected to all these other species, so it can really impact us in a very negative way. And I think that that's what, most people would really care about, is how it impacts humans. And so, first of all, like, all species are connected in some way, even humans. And so when you remove a piece of that puzzle or that web or that tree, it might all come crashing down. So it can cause ecosystem instability, or imbalance. The ecosystem, which is living and non-living, um, provides a lot of functions from ecological processes that control fluxes of energy, nutrients, organic matter through an ecosystem or an environment. And humans use a lot of these cycles and these processes and fluxes. And also ecosystem services, which are the benefits of that ecosystems and living things provide for humanity. And there are three major types of ecosystem services: provisioning, regulating, and cultural. And so the first is provisioning, and that's just the production of renewable resources, so food, plants and animals that people eat, wood, which are trees, living organisms, and then fresh water um, as well. And then we also have regulating, which lessens environmental change. So this can include climate change, pest and disease control. I commonly think of like the mangroves, who actually help prevent erosion and they prevent hurricane damage. And also cultural services. So, this Panamanian golden frog that I've showed you on this video, it holds a lot of cultural significance in the Central American country of Panama. But unfortunately, this frog is disappearing super fast due to spread of disease, or spread like of a fungal pathogen, which is largely in part due to human travel, and it's really had a detrimental impact on the cultural service that it provides humans. All right, so why should you care? Because you might feel like you're disconnected, that you're not really a part of it, but you are. Um, you know, Biodiversity has many values, and ecosystem services, which I just kind of outlined. And some people include this supporting services, but the ecosystems do a lot more than I'm describing, because I'm limited on my knowledge and my the expanse to which I can give you like so much information. But biodiversity gives us ecosystem services so many things that otherwise we wouldn't have. They have economic use values. People fish and they sell these fish, or they hunt and sell this meat or different plants and stuff. It has educational and scientific value, so we can learn a lot from the environment, from biodiversity, and it's super important. And it kind of, and that kind of goes into the next bullet point of like, there are pharmaceutical and medicinal values that have helped humans live longer and humans have healthier lives. And this is, in large part due to different animals or different plants that have great benefits. Ecotourism as well. Some people's livelihoods, they work for, say, a national park or some other type of, tourist destination that's related to the environment. And that can have a huge impact on someone's livelihood. And, if there's no biodiversity, no plants, no animals, people aren't going to want to go see just nothing. So ecotourism is very important, and that's something that biodiversity kind of pulls. All right, so also there is existence value, which is basically where if people find something important, or like some different type of species important, they're liable to make sure that that animal doesn't go extinct. But we should really have this mindset of every animal, every plant, every fungi, every bacteria has some purpose and should exist at some capacity. Also, and something that I think is super interesting is called environmental ethics. And this was really just kind of outlined in the textbook that I have, about basically related to humans in relation to animals. And a lot of times humans put themselves on this pedestal and try to make it as if like we are above other species, when in reality all these other species, from insects all the way up to like trees, giraffes, elephants, everything has a purpose and everything is uniquely important to their particular habitat or to their particular ecosystem, and they might provide ecosystem services or economic values or pharmaceutical values or ecotouristic values. Um, and so, this environmental ethics thing is, super important that we realize that, you know, animals and humans are kind of on the same level. Like, we're all living organisms living on this earth, for survival, for, um, you know, different, we have different reasons for being alive, but, we all serve a purpose and we're in this interconnected, web of life. um, Interdependency. So, really humans depend on us and we depend on these other species. And, we've caused a lot of the reason and a lot of the problems that they have. So, or most of the problems that they have. So really it should be our job. It's what we need to do is to help them and help the environment because we're really the reason why they have you know, biological diversity is, losing to such a great extent. Also, biophilia and aesthetic value. So this is just like a human's innate connection to nature that, we are inadvertently connected to nature in some way that we find it important and that, nature is beautiful and that we're connected to it. Um, and that just for that we should want to keep it alive because it's so amazing. um, and also it's important for future generations. Um, you know some of the things that we enjoyed as children might have been going to zoos, aquariums, going into nature, going into the woods, going on trips, and seeing these like beautiful organisms, really cool little insects and stuff. And if biodiversity keeps declining like it does, that could be a big problem for future generations. They might not be able to enjoy the types of things that we've enjoyed. So how are you involved? Because a lot of times I think we think that we're not involved at all, but I discussed this a little bit earlier that we have a huge impact on the environment, even as an individual, and then collectively as a community, or even as humanity as a whole. So there's this thing called the ecological footprint, and it's the per capita influence of a group of people that has on the surrounding environment and locations across the globe. So that's just like you as yourself or you as a community, how you impact the environment around you, or all over the world. And so here in developed nations we actually have a huge impact just because we are um, a society of overconsumption. We buy so many goods, and a lot of those goods come to the detriment of the environment. If there's no environment, there is no biodiversity because living things need the environment and they're a part of the environment. Um, and also environmental degradation and unsustainable practices have led to a big problem. And one of these problems, which is might not be the biggest problem, but it's certainly a giant issue that needs to be addressed, and action needs to be taken like right now, is that of single plastic use. And so, that's just plastic that you only use once. So just think of like plastic bags, plastic microbeads, and, cosmetics and, water bottles and stuff like that. So a statistic I found is that 280 million tons of plastic products are produced worldwide each year. And, most of it or a lot of it ends in either landfills or oceans. And, if it ends up in the ocean, it can have detrimental impacts on marine life, also seabirds, sea turtles, as you can see at the bottom, and it can also have a huge impact on terrestrial ecosystems as well, which current like people usually don't think about. And there has been a lot of conservation related to this, just because with the plastic straw movement to save the sea turtles and stuff. Um, so a lot of times we only view it as like a marine issue, but it's really a worldwide issue and it affects terrestrial land ecosystems as well, as you can see from this figure right here. All right, so simple ways you can help. In relation to single-use plastics, you can definitely just reduce it or even eliminate it. And that sounds like it'd be hard, but it's really not. You can use reusable bags, buy more glass products, or reusable containers other than Ziploc bags or plastic bags. And there are also a lot of different brands and products that are made that are biodegradable now, and they are made intentionally without plastics to prevent the detrimental effects that plastics can have on the environment. And I kind of touch on this in my book, but that hopefully your child will read. Also, you can advocate for biodiversity and healthy environments. So again, this video is just a very broad overview. So, I ask you to educate yourself a little bit more and become more involved in learning about biodiversity and the health of environments and human impacts, and really telling other people about it, making sure that your information is correct, and then going out and teaching your kids, teaching your friends, teaching the people that you might go to church with about biodiversity, because like I said earlier, education is really the first necessary step in changing anything. Also supporting your local conservation initiatives. So in Athens in particular, there are quite a few student-run organizations that students can be a part of, that go into local schools and teach kids about conservation, or they might clean up after a football game. And they might not be as prevalent in other places, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't ever start clubs or organizations in certain areas. I know where I'm from, there's this thing called Keep Forsyth County Beautiful, and they, every year like 200 or 300 people get together and they go out and clean up litter all over the roads. And so there are a lot of ways that you as an individual or a community can help. And another big way to reduce, climate change would be to reduce your driving and maybe bike more. And we might not all be in a position to do that, but I think that whenever we are given the opportunity, we should definitely at least try to do that. So what is currently being done? So currently there has been, due to the publicity of conservation, there has been a big increase in education and citizen science programs in the past, and a lot of these have been headed by conservation biologists or just environment advocates in general. And there's also a growing number of conservation biologists. So as we promote this idea of conservation and the conservation movement, we're kind of sparking kids their interests, and they carry that into their college careers, and they're like, hey, I can make a difference. I want to do something related to this science field. So, we have an increasing number of conservation biologists, which is needed because biodiversity continues to decline. So we need more and more people behind us, conservation biologists, and just people in general, citizens, policymakers, which goes into my next bullet point. There have been quite a few national policies and laws in effect, but there definitely needs to be a much greater emphasis on passing laws that go into helping other species and biodiversity. Additionally, a lot of zoos, aquariums, rehabilitation programs are really great for promoting biodiversity, or making sure that certain different living organisms and animals don't go extinct. And then my last bullet point is that everyone must participate. There are almost 8 billion people on this earth, so as human population growth continues, the detriment to the environment is likely to increase as well. So we really need to get a whole community, especially in developed nations and developing countries, to start acting in a way that is sustainable or conserving. Um, and again, I think that the most important way that we can do this is just to educate younger people, and really teach them about the importance of conservation and all these values that I kind of introduced, um, that they have to humans, but also just like, in terms of environmental ethics, just that, you know, species are important just because they're also living organisms and that they have a purpose on this earth, and they help humans as well in a great way, in a necessary way. Um, so I guess one caveat to this video, in this introduction, very broad overview of conservation, and biodiversity, that biodiversity is currently declining, that is a huge problem because biodiversity is necessary for life, and it has many human ecosystem services that, humans benefit from, and that biodiversity, we can make a difference. And so I guess one caveat is that this problem is huge and multifaceted, and there are many, many human activities that cause biodiversity loss, and it's a problem worldwide, and there's no one solution to the problem. But I think that with increased education and increased knowledge and increased understanding of, again, just more knowledge about what biodiversity is, and more individuals and communities that are backing up, more conservation biologists, more people who are becoming educated in how to manage certain ecosystems, certain habitats, um, and have more sustainable practices, I think that biodiversity loss could be slowed. And this is a huge issue, and it definitely, there's no easy, uncomplicated way to fix it. But just because like the world is so vast and there's so many different types of habitats, but I think that if we can really educate people about um, how to how to help out their own environment, or at least those who have the ability to help out additional environments. But I think that it's really important to just educate people about this conservation issue. All right, so finally we get to the book talk, at the very end. I'm sorry for taking up, a lot of your time, but also I think that this is a very important, very pressing issue that needs to be addressed. Um, and one of those ways that I try to address this is by writing a children's book, which is the main means of communication. And really, this video is just for parents as like an asset in addition to the book. So the book is titled "What is Biodiversity?" And biodiversity just looks like that because for a kid it could be kind of hard to say. So, just kind of outlines it. So my inspiration for writing this book, growing up, I had a big lack of knowledge regarding anything related to conservation other than like reduce, reuse, recycle. But I really had no understanding of like what biodiversity was, what conservation was. Um, and I had no idea that there was this like larger conservation movement going on, until I came to college, um, which in my mind, is just way too late to start learning about these things that are being impacted and affected by human activities, and that my actions have impacted certain environments in a negative way, and that I didn't even know about it until I came to college. So, also one study that I looked at, um, that asked over 500 people to describe what biodiversity was, and most of these people were adults, and for the most part, only a third of them were able to correctly identify and describe what biodiversity was. So that means the majority of them didn't even know what the word meant, or didn't know how to properly use the term. So that kind of made me think, like, if a child can learn about this term and what these words mean, then they could have this by the time that they go to college or by the time that they enter their career as a scientist, um, they could they would have so much more knowledge and so much more understanding and depth behind what biodiversity is and what conservation is and how their actions can impact the environment. And I've also seen a lot of lack of care and consideration for other species. Where I was raised, I love where I was raised, but they didn't have any, no one really cared about the environment, which is so unfortunate because we have where I'm from in North Georgia, there's a lot of environment, and humans really, a lot of them didn't have any consideration for how important and necessary that ecosystem is for their survival, as well as all the other species. And there's a necessity for people to enter the science fields related to conservation as biodiversity loss continues. So that's something that I talk about a little bit in the children's book, and trying to, spark this kid's imagination to get him to become, to enter the science field, because it's so necessary that we have more people in the science field. Also, to help children find their passion, I think that science is super cool, and I think that, you know, a lot of kids would think it's cool if they just had an opportunity to hear it and learn about it from a young age. Also, to show children that they can have an impact to prevent biodiversity loss. Like I outlined earlier, there are so many things that we can do just to kind of, repress our own effects, repress our ecological footprint, and our negative impacts on the environment. Also, I want to talk about the importance of education again. Education, like I said, I think twice already, is the first step in any type of change, and it's the first step in conservation. People have to have knowledge and know about it in order to understand it and know how to fix it. All right, so the book, the thesis, really like what I outlined in my inspiration, really the overall plot thesis of it is, so there is this, sea turtle and a seagull, and they are wrapped in plastic and they can't get loose. And so this boy named Christopher actually finds them and he saves them. And then they start talking about how this happened and how, human actions caused this. And the kid is like, how in the world, like, who would ever do this? That's so mean. And the sea turtle and seagull are quick to say, humans may not have meant to do this, but people need to understand that their actions have a big impact on everything. And so they mention the word biodiversity and conservation, and you can read the book, but this kid's kind of like, what are these words? What does this mean? And so they kind of teach him what biodiversity is, what conservation is, how he can help and make a difference. It's really a fictional book, but with an educational background. So for the most part, I just give, true ways that even a kid can make a bit of difference, as well as, kind of hopefully provide a fun and entertaining way of presenting that information. And I hope that I made it in as comprehensible a way as I could have, so that even like younger kids, especially what I wrote it to be geared for, which is elementary age kids, can understand it and really, benefit from it and gain a lot of knowledge. So that's, really what I hope. And lastly, I just hope that you enjoy reading the book. Parents, I hope that you enjoy discussing this, the topics that you learned with the topics that your child learns, because, I think that he can gain a nice bit of introductory knowledge to biodiversity and how humans are connected. One of the difficulties I had in writing this children's book is that, these ideas are so complex that, most people don't even understand or comprehend them. So I tried to make it as simple as possible so that maybe even a kid could understand what the word biodiversity means, or what a species is, or what an ecosystem service is. And hopefully I succeeded at that, or at least with the help of a parent's understanding, I can succeed in that goal. But without further ado, thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you truly benefit and gain from reading my children's book called What is Biodiversity? Thank you.